we begin reading, he went forth by the seaside, and all the multitude resorted unto him, and he taught them as he passed by. And he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the receipt of custom, and said unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him. At least 3 different commentaries and 4 dictionaries all agree that this Levi is the same as Matthew the apostle. Now, at least one of them hinted that he may be the brother of James the Less, or son of Alphaeus, as he's sometimes recognized. And I don't want to watch me on screen. James the Less, Jude, or Judas, and Judas or Thaddeus, all the same person, and Simon the Canaanite were brothers. Everyone that I read about agreed with that. And so if Levi is a brother to James the Less, he would also be brother to them. And that would put four brothers in the among the 12 apostles. But then that's not unusual because there are several sets of brothers. It has also been mentioned that they could have all been cousins to Jesus. This son of Alphaeus, or in Hebrew, is called Clophas and Mary. Clophas and Mary being the sister of Mary the Virgin. So there's a lot of family ties there. And after that, there was arguments for and arguments against. And so anyhow, I spent a whole day on this. I spent a whole day putting this together, studying it, and restudying it. And what I finally decided was, you study it and make up your own mind who they are. But the arguments, most of the arguments that argue these were cousins living in the same household is intended to keep Mary as the virgin, and we know better than that. But at any rate, after a day of studying on just those names, I decided it's y'all's choice. You look it up. It is interesting. The one thing that we can say of Matthew and the other apostles is that he left all and followed Jesus. Now, I'm not sure what all this entails. I know Peter and Andrew had a boat to go back to after the crucifixion. Peter has the famous quote, "I go fishing." I mentioned that at a men's breakfast one time while I was still in seminary, and I was getting ready to go fishing afterward in the Saline River. And I said, I'm going fishing. And Brother Dillard said, I go with thee. But at any rate, as we look at this, we see that what they did is they laid their stuff down and they followed Jesus. And I've mentioned this many times. Matthew was responsible to the Roman government, so he couldn't just walk away from that without having some kind of planning for someone to take over. Because, well, at that particular time, you didn't cross Rome. But anyhow, as we look at this, we see these men, and I suspect this is very similar to the call to the ministry today, because in that the fact that they abandoned their trade, that was at the seat of the custom tax collector, that was his trade. And fishermen for Peter and Andrew, or John and James, that was their trade. So they left their trade that they had trained for and turned and became fishers of men. My trade when I surrendered to preach was law enforcement. I don't mind telling you, I love putting people in jail. I just, they deserve it, and I enjoyed doing it. But as we go on into this, in verse 15 it says, and it came to pass that as Jesus sat at meat in his house, many publicans and sinners sat also together with Jesus and his disciples. For there were many, and they followed him. And when the scribes and Pharisees saw him eat with publicans and sinners, they said unto his disciples, How is it that he eateth and drinketh with publicans and sinners? When Jesus heard it, he said unto them, They that are whole have no need of a physician, but they that are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but the sinners to repentance. So as we look at this, Jesus went to Matthew's house. He first said, Come and follow me, but then he goes to Matthew's house. And he's sitting and eating, and there's many publicans and sinners there. As a matter of fact, everybody there, with the exception of one, was a sinner. Every single one of them, which is something that it was a lesson that the Pharisees never did learn. They should have, but they never did. They were in need of that. Romans chapter 3 verse 23 tells us everybody is sinners. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And the Pharisees, we've talked about them just recently. They were counting on the law, and it was never able to save anyone. I said Sunday, the Old Testament saints were saved exactly the same way you were, by grace through faith. I think I'm almost over this stuff. I really do. But with camp, it'll probably come back. The Apostle Paul, writing to the Galatians in chapter 2, verse 16, tells us the law never could save anyone. Chapter 2, verse 16, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ, even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. I spoke along that same line Sunday as well. But when we see this, the Pharisees see this, and they turn and they said, Why is he doing this? Why would he do such a thing? Well, I don't suggest going to a bar to try and preach, but anywhere we go, we're going to be among sinners, and we ought to be willing to say, Jesus saves. And go into detail of why Jesus saves. Because we're sinners. We need a Savior. And that's what the Lord said. He answered them, and he basically said, they're the ones that need it, and they're the ones that are ready to receive it. Um, sometimes, sometimes your witness to people is futile because they're just not going to hear it. They're going to be hostile to you. They're going to shut their ears. Uh, and the first thing that a person has to do in order to be saved is realize they're lost. I've told this story, I know, many times because I've been here a long time. and this story has always stuck with me as an illustration. When I was at Centerview Missionary Baptist Church in the Bermuda Triangle, Benton, Malvern, and Hot Springs is called the Bermuda Triangle. Preachers, they get in there and they get in churches there and they never leave. They just move from church to church around in circles. But a man and his wife moved into the community. His name was Miles, and I can't remember his last name. But I went and we were visiting. One of the members went with me. We were visiting with them. And I was talking and witnessing to Miles. And he said something to the fact that he was not saved. And so I was continuing to talk. And I said, "You just said you're lost." He said, "No, I didn't. I didn't say that. I'm not lost." "Well, you said you're not saved." "No, I'm not saved, but I'm not lost." You've got to get them lost first. If they don't think there is a problem in their life, they don't see themselves as sinners, they can't be saved. So anyhow, Jesus told the Pharisees, these are the people that need it because these are the people that are ready to receive it. And the Pharisees weren't. They were like Miles. I'm not lost. Anyway, we continue on, and the disciples of John and of the Pharisees used to fast, and they come and say unto him, "Why do the disciples of John and of the Pharisees fast, but thy disciples fast not?" Jesus saith unto them, "Can the children of the bridegroom fast while the bridegroom is with them? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken away from them, and then they shall fast in those days. No man," I know this don't seem like it goes together, but it does go together. "No man also seweth a piece of new cloth in an old garment, else the new piece that is filled up take away from the old, and then the rent made worse. And no man putteth new wine in old bottles, else the new wine doth burst the bottles, and the wine is spilled, and the bottles will be marred. But new wine must be put in new bottles." Greek text indicates that they, the ones that came to him, the disciples of John and the Pharisees, they were fasting at that time. We're fasting. How come you aren't? The Pharisees, as a common practice, fasted twice a week. In fact, there's an instance where the Pharisee is praying on the street corner, and he mentions the fact that he fasts twice a week. They fasted on Thursday and Monday and Thursday. their tradition was Moses went up into the mount on Thursday and returned from the mount on Monday, and so they fasted. Fasting was a manner of afflicting yourself, and really the affliction that the Lord wants is don't stop eating and drinking. Afflict yourself by forcing the flesh to yield to the Spirit. Just spend, if they'd have spent Monday and Thursday concentrating on how I might better serve God and please Him, had been way better than the fast. So they said, we're fasting, why aren't you? And the fact that John's disciples were fasting is evidence it was a common practice among religious Jews to fast. Sinners and publicans didn't. That's the reason they were there at Matthew's house having a nice meal. As I say, fasting was a form of afflicting the soul. Leviticus chapter 16, verse 29 says, and this shall be a statute forever unto you, that in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall afflict your souls and do no work at all, whether it be one of your own country or a stranger that sojourneth among you. Jesus said the days would come when the bridegroom would be taken away from them, and then they would fast or they would mourn. In the most literal form, what God wants is to yield your body, the flesh, to the will of the Spirit. We've been talking about the difference in the flesh and the Spirit, the inner and outer man, in Romans chapter 7, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be more than a month dealing with it, unless I do it on morning and evening both. He says, no man seweth a piece of new cloth in an old garment. New cloth is referring to cloth that has not been to the fuller to be shrunk. When I was doing the kingdom study, I didn't know what a fuller was. So I looked it up and found out. A fuller, his job was shrinking new cloth and cleaning it. That's the reason, Jesus said, it says that Jesus' garment was wider than any fuller could full it. Don't get sidetracked. New cloth has not been shrunk. Old cloth has. You put new cloth in an old garment, and first time it gets wet, it's going to shrink and it's going to tear. That's that one. Now, such was the case of the, well, wait a minute here. Did I skip an outline? New wine has to be put in new skins. The bottle that they refer to is an animal skin, generally a goat skin. And as the wine ferments, the uh, pressure from it swells the bottle. And old bottles have already been swelled to the as far as they will. So you put new wine in an old bottle, and it will break. Such was the case of the old and new covenants. The old covenant has not passed away, and it won't until it's fulfilled in its entirety by Jesus. Matthew 5:18. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. I talked about that Sunday. I'm testing you to see whether you're remembering anything that I say. And then the new wine. Faust dictionary says that without ventilation, the fermentation process would strain even new bottles. Thus, it would burst an old bottle. In like fashion, the old covenant could never ever contain the whole of the new. Something many Jewish converts had a very hard time understanding. That's the reason the book of Hebrews was written, to tell them everything's better. And what Jesus was trying to tell them was there's something coming, something new coming that is far better than anything you could imagine. Forget the law. Believe on Jesus. The book of Hebrews, well, I'm going to close with that. See, I told you I'd keep it short. The book of Hebrews tells them, and it reminds us, that this new covenant is much better than the old. The word itself is better. Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. There is a better inheritance. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 4. There, it is established on better promises. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 5. There is a better high priest. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 15 and 16. We are assured of a place in heaven. Hebrews chapter 6, verses 19 and 20. And we could go right on through the whole book. And everything about this new covenant that at that time was still coming is better. Jesus was telling them a change is coming, and that change is for the better. And then we Gentiles have been included in that new covenant. I know y'all are not of that bunch, but there are denominations, there are Christians who think we've replaced the Jews. That's not so. I read on Facebook just recently someone that I thought better of who says Israel don't belong to the land don't belong to Israel anymore, that they've been displaced. Well, it's not so. We've been included in this new covenant, and we never had to experience the misery and pain of the old. I'm through, but can you imagine? You're in the field working. I didn't have plants or factories. You were in the field working, or in the vineyard working. And you stubbed your toe and you said, oh, you've got to go to the temple. To ask forgiveness, you have to go to the temple with a gift. We never had to experience that. And yet we're a part of this glorious new covenant. Let's stand and be dismissed.